la ciberseguridad pues importa y mucho, ¿no? Uno de los actores principales de la ciberseguridad en el mundo son los Estados Unidos. Entonces, esta quinta sesión se titula Retos de la ciberseguridad para el siglo XXI. La carrera nuclear en la que competían Estados Unidos y Rusia generó lo que se llamó la doctrina de la destrucción mutua asegurada, que disuadió del empleo del arma nuclear. Descartado el juego de la aniquilación, ahora la amenaza busca injerencias de distinta graduación que puedan afectar a la base misma del sistema democrático. Con las elecciones norteamericanas de noviembre de 2020 como horizonte de proximidad y el recuerdo de los comicios de 2016 como telón de fondo, Washington y Moscú juegan su partida en un tablero que difiere del de 40 años atrás, subidos al escenario de las nuevas tecnologías que amplifican los impactos y permiten planificarlos con mayor precisión. Para hablar de estos y otros asuntos que interesan y mucho a la administración norteamericana, a la administración de los Estados Unidos, está con nosotros en este seminario Madeleine Mortelmans, directora principal para Política de Seguridad del Departamento de Defensa de los Estados Unidos. Mrs. Mortelman, hello. Good afternoon here in Madrid. Good morning in Washington. Nice to meet you.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me today.
Okay.
I'm very pleased. Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here and to have the opportunity to talk to you today about the Department of Defense, how we understand the threat in cyberspace today, how we're responding to the threat, and to give a little bit of preview about how we across the US government are understanding the challenges that we face, and also participate in some question and answer. As you highlight, if that's okay.
I'm very pleased to introduce you to our guests here presently, our guests that are digital by streaming. They are looking us. Madeleine Mortelmans is the Principal Director of Cyber Policy in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Her office establishes and oversees the implementation of DoD cyberspace policy and strategy. It provides guidance and oversight on DoD cyberspace activities, and they relate for foreign cyberspace threats, international cooperation, engagement with foreign partners and international organizations, and implementation of DoD cyberspace strategy and plans, including those related to cyberspace forces, capabilities, and their employment. Madeleine has worked in the Office of the Secretary of Defense since 2004 in numerous roles, including special assistance to 2 undersecretaries and in roles advising on strategy and budget and Asia. Prior to joining the Cyber Office, Madeleine was detailed to the US mission to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, advising the ambassador on defense issues and supporting negotiations to cyber confidence building measures. Before joining OSD, Madeleine worked as contractor to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency on the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program. I think that you have a very interesting CV. So we want to introduce this panel with the first question that you may tell us. A scope that can have the cyberspace tension. We talk later about the mutual assured destruction of the nuclear weapons. Do you believe that cyberspace may reach that capability, can reach a mutual assured destruction or not?
So I think it's a really great question. If it's all right with you, before we jump right into that, I just wanted to share a little bit about how we understand more broadly the security environment and how we're working to respond and then get to the specifics of kind of the idea of deterrence and how that plays out. So in that, the United States has long recognized the importance of open and reliable access to the internet for national security and prosperity. This is a strongly held view in DoD. And in fact, you know, as many people know, the 1969 DoD R&D project focused on open and reliable access to information called ARPANET actually led to the establishment and development of the internet. What has changed in recent years in terms of our view is our understanding of the growing severity of the threat that is posed to that open and access reliable information. Our military superiority deters conventional aggression, but our adversaries, Russia, Iran, China, DPRK, are increasingly taking action in the gray zone below the threshold of armed conflict to undermine our security. They're conducting coordinated campaigns of malicious cyber activity. In the context of that growing threat, DoD conducted a strategy and posture review and concluded that we must change our approach to confronting it. Cybersecurity is necessary, but not sufficient, and it requires a more comprehensive and proactive approach. I am happy to talk in more detail about that comprehensive and proactive approach, but I wanted to just highlight in particular this view that we must be able to defend forward, just as we do in land, at sea, in the air, in space. The U.S. Department of Defense is constantly engaged in the world to identify and address threats in order to respond before they reach our shores, before they reach our homeland. In the same way, we believe we must be doing that in cyberspace. So what does that mean? What does it look like to defend forward in cyberspace? Well, it looks a lot like what you'd expect a traditional military to be doing. It means, for example, generating insights. This is about understanding what our adversaries are trying to do and what it looks like to gain insight. So in this way, the Department of Defense and our U.S. Cyber Command are conducting what we call hunt forward operations, or partnered network defense operations, just as we did with Montenegro, North Macedonia, Ukraine, and other countries around the world. We work together in a combined way, bringing together our combined expertise about threats to get a better sight picture on adversary activity. We're also, it's not just enough to understand what the adversary is trying to do, but we need to take action. And in that, we're working to enable better defense against that. In that spirit, we're using security research platforms such as VirusTotal to publicly release threat information to help contribute to the broader security community. To date, numerous DoD releases of malicious cyber activity from Iran, DPRK, and China are providing global benefit, inoculating millions of machines against that malicious cyber activity. And when appropriate, the DoD is prepared to conduct cyber effects operations in accordance with international law and consistent with norms of responsible state behavior. So I wanted to just highlight that because I think just putting out up front that this is how we're approaching the world and working with partners to accomplish promotion of stability and security and to strengthen norms of responsible state behavior is an important context and scene setter for the questions you wanted to talk about today. On the specific question of whether IT can lead to a situation of mutually assured destruction, I think the concept of mutually assured destruction and the other concepts of nuclear deterrence doctrine are not as applicable in cyberspace as they were in the context of the nuclear enterprise. For example, nuclear weapons are strategic, high-end, and extremely destructive. But cyber operations are far more complex and not so easily characterized. They are a category of activities from a tactical to a strategic. Another difference between nuclear and cyber is that nuclear technology is really high-end. It requires a level of expertise and investment that will be largely limited to nation states and has an opportunity for proliferation control. In contrast, cyber tools are commercially available. They're not limited to nation state actors and are not limited to a smaller set of nation state actors. So how do you hold an hacktivist or a cyber criminal at risk as the doctrine of mutually assured deterrence requires, or mutually assured destruction requires? There's also a difference with attribution. With nuclear weapons, there's a clear path to attribution that can be done in a very timely way. The cyber domain is more complex, which makes the idea that there will be assured response slightly more complicated. And then finally, the fact is that the absolute deterrence that mutually assured destruction sought to achieve is impossible in cyberspace because cyber tools are already available and are widely in use. That said, it is a generally accepted principle that a cyber operation can constitute an act of war or use of force. The view is that an attack is based on the effects that are caused rather than the means through which they're achieved. And we highlight that NATO confirmed that Article 5 could apply in a cyber attack. Moreover, a cyber attack does not necessarily necessitate a cyber response. In mutually assured destruction, it was nuclear on nuclear, but there's no requirement that if you used a cyber means to attack that we must respond. And we assess that our military superiority is really a fairly effective deterrent at that level of activity.
The nuclear weapons, we have a picture that it seems a very big destruction. If we suffer a cyber attack, people may lose the electricity, the water, the bank services, and so on. That's, of course, we may think to military installations and so on, but the main problem may be that the cyber attack may affect the people in his day by day.
Absolutely, that is an issue. But again, across the spectrum of what a cyber operation or malicious cyber activity can be, it is very small tactical changes of ones and zeros all the way through to what you've described. And we've certainly seen examples of adversary use of malicious cyber activity that has affected the delivery of critical infrastructure services to people, which is activity that's inconsistent with the norms of responsible state behavior. I'd highlight, for example, the 2017 NotPetya attacks, which had global impacts on the delivery of critical infrastructure services, which is really disturbing and highlights the need for a unity of purpose to strengthen those norms and to for states to act inconsistent with those agreed behaviors.
Mrs. Mostelmans, the main players in the cyberspace are United States, Russia, China. You can do some more in the shade with warring capacity?
So from the U.S. view, I think we are principally concerned about the malicious cyber activity from China, Russia, Iran, and DPRK. But that said, there's certainly a multitude of cyber actors. And in this domain, we have to be aware that it's not just limited to nation state actors. For China, we see them conducting espionage for economic and military advantage. In 2018, the Department of Justice estimated that more than 90% of economic espionage cases involved China, and more than 2/3 of cases involving the thefts of trade secrets were connected to China. This is all in spite of their 2015 pledge to not use cyber espionage for their economic benefit. More recently, in January 2019, the Department of Justice announced criminal indictments against malicious cyber actors associated with China's MSS for conducting a global campaign to compromise service providers to facilitate their cyber theft for economic gain. And in July 2020, DOJ announced indictments against 2 malicious cyber actors associated with MSS for stealing terabytes of data, including data related to COVID-19 vaccination development. Russia, we see conducting espionage, conducting operations to both disrupt and posture on critical infrastructure, and eroding confidence in our democratic systems. These are highlight efforts to interfere in the US 2016, 2018, and now 2020 elections, as well as the elections of our allies and partners. We've also seen efforts to pre-position on energy in the US. But these aren't the only threats, as you've noted. The North Korea flouts sanctions, hacking financial networks and cryptocurrency to generate funds to support their weapons development program. We see Iran conducting disruptive cyber attacks against US companies and our partners, along with information operations to push their own narrative across the Middle East. And we also see violent extremist organizations recruiting, raising funds, directing attacks, and distributing gruesome propaganda online. Beyond these state actors, I think I would just highlight for you some independent research. For example, CSIS, an American think tank, compiled a list of existing cyber strategies, highlighting 78 countries have national strategies, with 31 countries having military strategies, including both offensive and defensive aspects. The security research company, FireEye, produced a report called World War C, and in this case, the C is not for cookie, which details by region states it assesses as having offensive cyber programs. And as I highlighted, it's not just a threat from state cyber actors. There's also non-state actors. I highlighted VEOs, but cyber criminals should also not be discounted. Earlier this year, my colleagues from the Department of Homeland Security published an alert on the growing threat from ransomware, which we're seeing affect state and local governments, major businesses, and causing significant disruptions.
May we talk about the role of Europe? We are in Spain. Do you think this may recover a closer collaboration between Europeans and United States matter?
Absolutely. So the United States and Europe are long-standing partners. We have common values, a common economic system. We have benefited from a common international system, and we all rely on the internet in order to facilitate our daily lives. So we have a common interest here. The DoD 2018 strategy really emphasizes the importance of expanding and strengthening our partnerships in cyberspace. We highlight the importance of partnering with the interagency, our own US government, with industry, our private sector, but especially with our partners and allies. I think we have to collectively, the US and Europe, we have to be clear-eyed about the threat that we're facing. Disruptive states like Russia and China seek to undermine the international order, to sow discord within our countries, and to seize unfair economic and military advantage. There is no moral equivalency here, and that should motivate us to action. It is necessary for us to work together, to collaborate and foster strengthened internet governance standards, consistent best practices that are fair and equal, and that protect our values. We're working together like-minded efforts to strengthen and support norms of responsible state behavior and to operationalize confidence-building measures. For example, the work that we're doing together at the OSCE that I had the pleasure to be a part of is an excellent example of how the United States and Europe can partner together to promote stability and security in cyberspace. Work in the UN and another internet governing fora are another opportunity. But our cooperation cannot be limited to just activities online. We also have to focus on strengthening the security of our hardware and software, ensuring best practices that protect national and economic security. Evolving technologies such as 5G and AI and supply chain all present critical challenges that we as nations and as a community of like-minded must be able to work together to ensure. I'd also highlight from a DoD to our partners in the European Ministries of Defense, we have a number of initiatives underway that help us work together to leverage our complementary capabilities. Just as we work together in the other domains, we're working together and working to build our cooperation in cyberspace. Through US EUCOM, our command in Europe, we're doing things like training together, and we have a compendium of DoD training for security cooperation partners. We run an absolutely amazing course at the Marshall Center in Garmisch, Germany, on cybersecurity studies that brings together policy and technical experts from across Europe to enhance our level and our common understanding of threat and policy development. We do information sharing, such as EUCOM has a number of initiatives for enhancing our collective cybersecurity posture, such as Threat Connect and a private Slack channel to exchange indicators of compromise and insights that will help us better defend together. And we also conduct exercises, multilateral exercises, such as NATO Cyber Coalition and the NATO CCD COE's Lock Shield exercise. That one in particular, I wanted to highlight, the United States participates in this exercise as part of a multinational team. And these are all ways that we can work together to make sure we have the right policies, the right standards, the right international framework to enable stability and security together. And then at the Ministry of Defense, DoD level, that we can conduct combined operations in cyberspace, just as we do in the other domains, that ensure our military superiority and capability.
Here in Spain, we are very proud to work together, to collaborate with USA, you know. Let's see, you work in the Pentagon, in the Defense Department. We talk about defense, security, but you are very concerned about economy, trade, business, are the goals of the attacks, of the goals of the terrorist attacks of too, no?
Absolutely. I think one of the key considerations about the cyber domain is that this is really an intrinsic part of the day-to-day life of the American people, of our European partners. It is the backbone that has enabled so much of our economic success. And while it has critical national security implications, given our reliance on the cyber domain for our approach, our weapons systems, the fact of the matter is it's as critical, if not more so, to every other aspect of our lives today. And in that consideration, when you increase kind of your reliance, it increases your vulnerabilities. The more connected you are, the more vulnerabilities you have. The United States has been in the forefront of leading the integration of technology, and we're very proud of that, but with that comes vulnerabilities and risk. We're acutely aware of that at the DoD, and when you look at what the Department of Defense must be capable of, as written in our DoD strategy, we highlight the important mission that we have, what we call defend the nation. The requirement that we need to be prepared to protect our critical infrastructure from an attack of significant consequence. And in that, we recognize, back to the Defend Forward I highlighted earlier, the need to have an understanding of what our adversaries are trying to do and what their techniques look like, so that we can help our domestic partners, DHS, private companies, do a better job defending against it, so that we all can be better inoculated, and then also to, if required, to be prepared to act. It also guides how we approach what we do. I highlight repeatedly the norms of responsible state behavior. Those are a really important part of how we understand our role in cyberspace, is to strengthen and promote those norms because they benefit the greater good and contribute to stability and security in cyberspace that enable that economic prosperity that is a big part of our day-to-day lives and enables our societies to function.
Mrs. Moselsman, you are very concerned, we are very concerned about the risk of the cyberspace attacks, but is society aware of the risk? Movies, videos, social networks, new technologies complicate the real perception of the threats?
It's a really good question. I think in many ways the films do kind of complicate in terms of presenting a narrative that perhaps oversimplifies what is a cyber operation. Everything is always so easy and always extreme and high end, and certainly nothing is ever as easy as it seems in TVs and movie. I think this is a very complex domain, and understanding your individual, whether you're a private citizen, a business, or a government, understanding your reliance on the digital domain is really important. There's also the recognition that it's not just the actions in cyberspace, but how this digital domain can be used to amplify messages for foreign interference and foreign influence, to sow discord and create those challenges, and how the cyber domain kind of brings down borders. That free messaging and communication that we so value can also be exploited by our adversaries. In DoD, we think about risk as something that is the equation of vulnerability plus threat plus impact. Right now, our vulnerabilities are growing. As we embrace new technologies, we're using more and more forms of technology, and we're also putting more and more of our data online. So that means greater vulnerabilities and greater impact if something happens to it. That risk is only going to continue to grow as we adopt more Internet of Things technology and begin to move to 5G environments. Our threat is growing, as I highlighted. The scope and scale of what our adversaries are trying to do is increasing. So we do see that as a really big challenge that I think across the world we need to get a better understanding of. But that said, I don't want to focus on fear-mongering. All is not lost. And there's something to be said for the old adage that my mom always used to say to me, which is make good choices. And so when we look at the history of recent global cyber incidents, the really big things that all exploited known vulnerabilities with available patches. There was a solution out there that good cybersecurity and employing up-to-date software could have muted or mitigated the impact. An advanced persistent threat actor is always going to continue, as it says in the name, to be advanced and persistent to try to find a way in. But to date, the biggest incidents have all resulted from things that we should have been able to address with good cybersecurity. And so I'd highlight that what we need isn't necessarily a moonshot that's going to solve the cyber threat. It is instead having people employ best practices, keeping up-to-date software, using the right models, and making sure that we're all keeping up with that. And so I think that's an important thought. There is a really pressing threat, but all is not lost. In most instances, a good cybersecurity game will get you what you need.
Mrs. Mosselman, we have some questions of our guests. I'm going to tell you. Pedro González collaborate with atalayar.com, with Spanish television, says, are you aware that Russia or China will try to interfere in the next USA elections? How do you cope with that potential threat?
So on the, our DoD is part of a whole of government effort responding to the threats to our elections. On the specific threat, the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, has released public statements about the threats from a number of countries, including China and Russia. So on the specific aspects of the threat, I'll defer to them. But with regard to how we're working this, I'd like to speak about DoD as part of an unprecedented whole of government effort. And our comparative advantage is our ability to operate outside of the United States. And in that, we are working to generate insights about what the adversary is trying to do. How are they seeking to interfere, which is make changes on our networks and systems, or affect the network infrastructure, or how they're seeking to influence, which is changing the views of the American people. And we are looking to get as much information as we can. And the second step, as I highlighted, is about enabling good defense. It's not enough to know what the adversary wants to do. We have to make sure the right people have the right information. So in that, we are passing what we are able to generate to our Department of Homeland Security, indicators of compromise, defensive mitigations that will help them enable better defense of our systems. We're also identifying illicit personas, covert activity that we pass to the FBI. That's the overall lead for the Foreign Interference Task Force, the Counter Foreign Interference Task Force. Together, that helps them work with our private sector partners, social media companies, because those folks are violating the terms of service by masquerading. And so we've been able to help enable that activity. And finally, when appropriate, we will be prepared to take action, as General Nakasone has said. And this is an enduring mission for the Department of Defense and a very high priority for us.
Another question from Georgina Higueras. He had worked in the newspaper El País. She was correspondent in Moscow. Her question is, what country is a bigger threat for USA in the cyberspace, China or Russia?
So that's a challenging question to answer because the nature of their malicious cyber activity is different. I think, as I highlighted, we're seeing China conducting these long-term coordinated campaigns of malicious cyber activity that are seeking to erode our economic and military advantage. These are really troubling and unacceptable actions. I highlighted some statistics about how much China has stolen in terms of intellectual property and economic gain. In contrast, we see Russia seeking to disrupt our kind of in more near-term actions and activities. So they're both very pressing and compelling threats, but very different in nature. So I think from that perspective, they're both big issues that we are very keenly focused on.
From Alejandro Grosso Grazioli, which is the leader in the cybersecurity in United States agencies, NSA, Homeland Security, DoD, CIA. How is the coordination between all the agencies?
Absolutely. It's we're really complicated. So within the U.S. government, every department and agency has a specific role. The Department of Homeland Security is the lead department for protection of our critical infrastructure from cyber threats. They have an agency, CISA, that is responsible for that, and they are liaise with our critical infrastructure infrastructure sectors to provide advice and mitigation, to warn of threats. Underneath them, there are sector-specific agencies that work with their respective sectors. So, for example, the Department of Defense is the sector-specific agency for the defense industrial base. And we have very robust cybersecurity programs for our contractual partners to make sure that they're meeting our standards to protect our information. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, is the lead for investigating cyber crimes and cyber espionage and counter-influence activities. The DoD, as you know, is the lead for military operations. So each organization has their own, and we work together collaboratively to address the threats, leveraging our comparative advantages, which is our capabilities and our authorities. The elections is an excellent example where we have an unprecedented level of cooperation and coordination to ensure that we're putting together each of our respective abilities to advance towards our national outcomes. Our 2018 National Cyber Strategy, published by the White House, the first in 15 years, goes a really long way to articulating how we work together and the ends that we're working to accomplish.
Okay. From Canary Island, I suggest you to visit someday. Alberto Suárez Sutil is a very clever young analyst, sent this question. Do you fear that China may interfere cybernetically in the US political process, 2020 elections and beyond, or retaliate in trade via the cyberspace as a reaction to tariff and concerns on 5G?
I will highlight the Director of National Intelligence has released a statement that characterizes how we perceive the threats from adversaries to our elections and defer to that. I'm the defense professional, so I'm not as steeped in that, and so defer to them.
And also from the independent.com says, about cyber attacks, are we more vulnerable in this coronavirus age? Are there more cyber attacks now? Are they more serious in this era of coronavirus?
I think a lot of that gets into the cyber crime, which is my FBI colleagues' lead, that they focus on. From the perspective of the Department of Defense, I can tell you that the movement that we did to distributed operations, allowing people to work from home and to remain engaged and plugged in. The more networks you have, the more endpoints you have, the more distributed your operations are, the more attack surface you have, simply put. And so we've certainly seen the added challenge from conducting those distributed operations in COVID. But I think with all kudos to my colleagues in the Chief Information Officer and across the department, they've done a really good job responding and enabling us to operate in this way. The good news is the Department of Defense is used to conducting distributed operations, and they really risen to the challenge.
Marcos sent us a question. Which is the role of South America in cyber defense?
I think from our viewpoint, our partners in South America are really important and critical partners. And we have a number of partnerships with them that focus on addressing threats both in the region and more broadly. You have many leading technology experts, and we have many very strong defense bilateral partnerships that we are working to expand and strengthen in the cyber domain. With regard to their view of the world, I can't speak to that, but we are very pleased to work very closely and are actually looking forward to participating in a Western Hemisphere dialogue with the region, I think next week.
Roberto Uzal make a question. The U.S. financial system cyber preservation responsibility. What about that? What can you say that?
I apologize. I'm not sure I understand the question.
The U.S. financial system cyber preservation responsibility. What about that?
So our financial sector is one of our 16 critical infrastructure sectors. So broadly, our colleagues from the Department of Homeland Security work very closely. Underneath that, or as partnered with that, our Treasury Department is the sector-specific agency for the financial sector, and they have an extremely robust partnership with the financial sector, working both directly with companies as well as with the Financial Sector Information Sharing Council. And the Department of Defense, we have participated in a number of pilot programs to work closely both with Treasury and DHS partners as well as with the financial sector partners to understand the threat that they face, to help inform our operations and our activities outside of the United States, to help generate better insights for them and help enable better defense, and also to ensure that we're better prepared. We are actively engaged with a number of sectors to make sure that we understand their needs, working through our Homeland Security and sector-specific agency leads.
One question. The cooperation between Pentagon of official administration with the big company are going in the right way. For example, with Facebook or Microsoft, all the big companies in the cyberspace in the United States, you can get the information you need to avoid some cyber attacks, for example.
So outside of our direct business partnerships, obviously the DoD, we have a Facebook page, we use Microsoft products, we use a number of private sector company products. Those are our business relationships. In the operational environment, we work through our partners in the civilian sector, the Department of Homeland Security, FBI, working closely to ensure that we have that really strong communications. It's part of that whole of government approach and our comparative advantages. The FBI has a long-standing partnership in the example of the social media companies in kind of communicating about foreign influence activities that are happening online. The DoD, we have a strong partnership with the FBI, and we enable them in their partnership with the information that we collect. Similarly, if there's an issue of threats, we work very closely with DHS to make sure they have the right information to reach the right sectors and the right companies, to make sure that the overall community is protected. And we're also increasingly releasing our own information in coordination and conjunction with our DHS colleagues and FBI colleagues. You'll see that our Cyber Command team have their own Twitter account where they'll highlight threat, malware activity, threat reports, and our National Security Agency, NSA colleagues are also releasing reports more publicly, all in the spirit of making sure that the broader community has the right information at the right time to enable better defense.
From Pablo Paz and Miño, good morning. How do you conceptualize hybrid threats in cyberspace?
We spend a lot of time thinking about the cyber threats. Malicious cyber activity is what we call it, the activity below the threshold of armed conflict. And I think one of the most significant realizations that we had as part of our 2018 review is that we can't view the incidents as individual activities. Instead, we have to view them as coordinated campaigns that are conducted as part of a strategic effort to gain asymmetric advantage, economic, military, national security advantage. So for instance, if we just look at every single exfiltration of information from our defense industrial base as individual incidents, they might be not that concerning. But when we looked at them collectively and the impact they were having, it was very significant to see that as they took this piece of unclassified and this piece of unclassified and this piece of unclassified collectively, it translated into strategic insight into our weapon systems, our future military advantage. And that was unacceptable, that we needed to be postured to be more proactive, both in terms of how we defend. So in 2015, we talked about defending DoD systems and our networks. In 2018, we're talking about defending our information, which means wherever it is, but also more proactive in terms of how we respond, that we're going to view these acts as what they are, which is coordinated campaigns of activity.
Fernando García Vaquero, coming back to NATO, in case a cyber attack against one of more NATO members implies the activation of Article 5, what kind of military answers might be considered? Is it necessary to have the umbrella of UN mandate?
So in the case of Article 5, it means that we will use the normal NATO consultative mechanisms and the normal procedures. What I can't stress enough is the means of attack are less important than the effects. And just as the same way, if there was an air attack, we wouldn't only respond as NATO in air. In the same way, it is the US view that a cyber attack doesn't have to be responded to with just a cyber response. Cyber domain is a domain of military operations, and the US position is we reserve the right to respond at the time and with the means we see appropriate. And I think NATO discussions really focus on the responsibility and priority to defend against an attack, but do recognize that there are adversaries that do seek to attack and could use the cyber domain to achieve the effects in the physical domain that would be equal to an attack.
Okay. From Juan Cuesta, can the fragility of cyberspace security force some states to reduce the information shared among allies, even within NATO, and carefully consider what to share and with whom? Second one, how much is there of real risk and how much of protection of their own industry, their own interests in the US pressures on the UA to keep Huawei out of the 5G networks?
Okay, so the first question was about info sharing. I think info sharing is critically important. I think the ability to understand threats, ensure that we can all defend better against them. We are very committed to this. We do info sharing with our partners, allies and partners at the classified and unclassified level. I highlighted some of the things our EUCOM colleagues do. I, prior to COVID, regularly traveled to NATO to brief on our understanding of the threats with more technical experts. This is an important part of what we need to do together. So I think that's a really important thing to highlight, and I thank the questioner for that. On the issue of 5G, is it a real risk? I think as I highlighted earlier, we must be clear-eyed about the threat. When you look at the range of issues associated with 5G technology and how it's applied, and you look at a number of factors, including Huawei's consistently poor cybersecurity practices, and China's national security law that necessitates any Chinese company provide any information requested by the Chinese government, it is a question for a country to pose to itself whether that level of risk is acceptable. I think collectively we've done good work through the Prague conference to articulate what best practices should look like so that a country can make a choice for itself. But I think the US position is clear. It isn't something unique. It is our Congress has made clear. The Department of Defense has a Huawei ban because we have determined that it would be unacceptable to allow adversary company that has a requirement controlled by the adversary to have privileged access to our networks and our information. And it seems when you put it in those stark terms, when we are clear-eyed, it's a pretty clear choice from our view.
Okay, we have two last questions to finish. From Marcos, how do you deal with alleged cyber attack information to determine if it's real attack or just a psychological strategy?
So with regard to foreign influence, I think a key aspect to keep in mind is that we don't look at the information. In the United States, we have some of the strongest freedom of speech laws in the world. It includes the right to receive information. It was the first thing our founders did after establishing. It's the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, say and hear what you want. And so that's really important to us. And in all the things we do, we would fail if we failed to protect that. So it's not about the information, it's about the actors. There are actors, foreign adversaries, foreign agents that are seeking to covertly influence. And so our objective there is to expose them for who they are and to make it harder for them to hide what they're trying to do. It isn't about information, it's about the foreign actors.
The last one from Julian. How can the peripheral countries that can't access to coordinated activities with the big platforms, Google, Facebook, and so on, protect themselves from foreign disinformation campaigns?
So I have seen some really interesting studies about that. There's some great work from, for example, the Atlantic Council has done some products that talk about how to kind of defend better. A lot of it relies on informing your public and educating your public about the threat and enabling critical thinking. I think this is a little outside of the what we do, but I would commend to you, I enjoyed reading the work from the Atlantic Council, and some of the countries in Europe who have faced this challenge for a long time. Realistically, the cyber domain didn't create this problem. It just expanded it and created new vectors and venues for this problem. And I think if we look at historical practice of what worked effectively, we have a lot to learn from our own past to counter this.
We have one more. They just arrived. I don't know if you have time, 1 minute to answer the last. So the last. From Daniel Calvache from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Very nice city. Early analysis of the 2016 Russian attacks made clear social media played a significant role in the disinformation campaign employed by Russian intelligence. They planted false information to influence voters' opinions of candidates. Have US developed any mechanism capable of early detection of fake news? This is to reduce the damage caused by the spread of fake news?
So again, in this instance, the Department of Defense is part of a broader whole of government effort. My colleagues at the FBI are doing absolutely incredible work in this respect. They have Protected Voices campaign. They do defensive briefings. They're working with our legislative branch and with the companies to create best practices all along this. All I can speak to is the DoD approach. And as I highlighted earlier, for us, it's about the actors. It's about generating insight about what the actors are trying to do so that we can provide what we call in military speak, the tipping and cueing, the advice, the insight that will enable better defense. So if we see in kind of our activities that they're developing these fake personas online, we're going to make an effort to highlight them for our FBI colleagues so that they can work to expose them. And if we see that kind of activity, we want to make sure that people are aware and can take appropriate action. So that's really what we're focused on. But I think, again, we're part of a whole of government effort, and our FBI colleagues have some really great work that I would highly commend.
Madeleine Molsterman, Principal Director of Cyber Policy in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Thank you very, very much. It's a very great pleasure for us to join in this afternoon in this seminary about the security and defense of cyberspace. Thank you very much. I hope join you later in other occasion.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a real pleasure.
We have learned a lot with you. Thank you. Applause, please. Bye bye, Madeleine. Thank you. Terminamos la jornada de hoy y recordaros que a las 9:30 mañana retomamos el seminario con China. Hemos hablado mucho de China con Madeleine. Ciberpotencia sin control. Además, Georgina Higueras moderará la sesión. A las 9:30, os esperamos a todos aquí puntuales. Muchas gracias a todos.